Hello and welcome to another episode of Roots and Resilience, a leadership podcast by DBNC where we have conversations about leadership. We hope that these conversations build insightful and engaging perspectives as we journey in our lives. My name is Christian Fox, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming today. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me here.
Good. I'm glad Jay's going well. Thank you for being here. I think it's great that you agreed to do the podcast, and I think we'll have a very good discussion.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, we will definitely. So first, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do with Embrave?
Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Pacheco. I use she, her pronouns, and I wear two main hats in my role. So I am the development and education manager at Embrave Agency to End Violence, and I am also the coordinator of the Peel Committee Against Women Abuse, or PCAWA. So I'm kind of always wearing two different hats. I can give you a brief overview of kind of both of those and what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be very good.
So yeah, I'm the development and education manager at Embrave, and for those who maybe aren't familiar with Embrave and the work that we do in our community, we're an anti-violence organization, and we provide shelter, counseling, and advocacy for women, two-spirit, genderqueer, trans, and non-binary survivors of violence experiencing any form of gender-based violence in our community. We operate two shelters in the region of Peel, emergency shelters for survivors of gender-based violence, and we also have our community support and outreach program, which means we're able to provide supports to survivors in our community that aren't staying in our shelter but are still looking for support. We have a team that's able to provide supports to them as well. So that is what I'm kind of doing at Embrave. I support with the fundraising and development, as well as I am the manager of things related to public education around gender-based violence. So that's my Embrave hat. And then my PCAWA hat is I'm currently the coordinator of the committee. We are the official Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee in the region of Peel. But there are committees across the province. So we are that committee in Peel. And we are a committee of different member organizations in Peel, like Dixie Bloor Neighborhood Center. And we are really working together as a community to end gender-based violence in our community. So we have a shared goal that we're all working towards, and this is kind of like a central place where we can come together and have conversations around gender-based violence. So we do public education, we do trainings, we do resource development, and advocacy. So again, at a community lens, how we can be better coordinating to respond to gender-based violence, specifically in Peel.
Okay, yeah. That's a lot of different work that you're doing.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So can you tell us, for those that might not be aware of it, what is gender-based violence?
Yeah, okay. So gender-based violence is big, and it's complicated, and it's complex. But really it centers around the concept of violence that is perpetrated or enacted that is rooted in power dynamics and gendered power dynamics more specifically. So this is why women, girls, trans, non-binary folks, two-spirit, genderqueer folks are more at risk of experiencing gender-based violence because of those gendered power dynamics that come into play when you're specifically talking about gender-based violence as opposed to another form of violence. It's important to remember that gender-based violence doesn't just look like one thing or present itself as one type. And it's very important as we're having conversations not only in how to support survivors, but also how we want to be preventing gender-based violence. It's understanding that it's going to come through in many different ways, and it's going to look like different things. And it's not uncommon for folks, when we think about gender-based violence, we right away think about physical kinds of violence, which is often, I think, because those are the forms that are easiest to see. It's easiest to see the impacts when someone is experiencing physical violence. But again, it is important to remember that gender-based violence can be a variety of different things and forms. You have, for example, emotional or psychological violence. You have sexual violence. You have stalking, harassment. You have human trafficking. You have technology-facilitated gender-based violence. You have systemic violence. So it's important to remember that gender-based violence is complex. It's not just one thing, and that no one form is more valid or has a larger impact than the other. Like, these are all things that are need to be validated for survivors when they are experiencing them. It's important to understand the nuances of these different types of violences, how our response might differ depending on the type of violence somebody is experiencing. But it's really just that remembrance that it's not just this one thing or this one type, that we need to validate all forms of different types of violence, because they're going to show up differently for different people.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very common belief
Yeah.
that, it's only physical, but people have to
Yeah.
forget there's emotional, and then there's even more complicated things
Yeah.
like how did you describe it?
Technology
Technology-based.
facilitated gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So exactly, things, gender-based violence that's facilitated on online platforms or using technology devices, which now is much more prevalent than ever before, given the fact that technology is much more prominent and used than maybe it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Even 5 years ago, it was used differently, right? And that's hard for us to keep up with, because as technology changes, so do the way people are using it for good and bad. And so we're having to update in real time with it to make sure that we're supporting survivors as they need, based on the violence that they're experiencing. So that one is particularly difficult because of that.
And so how has that changed in the last 5 years?
Yeah, so one of the things, like, more and more we're seeing is tech, and things like air tags. That's something new, right? Air tags are being used to track people, unfortunately. So they're being placed on either in a house or in on a car, someone's car, and someone's belongings without them knowing. And it's being used as a tracking device.
Right.
So that folks can track where potentially the person is going, who they're visiting, just where they're going. And that's something maybe we wouldn't have had to think about for sure not 10, but even 5 years ago. Air tags are newer, even if folks are using other tracking devices, like even pet trackers that folks use specifically for their pets, are now being used as a way to enact violence and do that stalking and vigilance and surveillance on people. And so now we're having to take that into consideration, even on intake, for example, if that's a possibility. And sometimes people are putting more than one device, so you find one and you have that sense of relief, but then there's that secondary one that maybe that folks aren't realizing. So that is very much a form of tech violence that we wouldn't maybe have had to think about as deeply 5 years ago, that even now we're having to think about much more intentionally.
Okay, wow, that's kind of a scary thought, because I didn't
It's
even
terrifying,
think
yeah.
of something like an air tag, which is
Yeah.
a very common device now.
Yeah.
It's very accessible.
I have one on my pet.
Yeah.
They're very accessible. Quick Amazon order. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some things that those that are experiencing it can do, whether it be technology-based or emotional-based or even physical-based?
Well, all of these things are going to require a different response. I will say, if someone is experiencing gender-based violence now, there are supports and services available for you in your community, whether it be at Embrave or other community organizations in your community. If you're outside the region of Peel or wherever you might be located, there are people there to support you. You don't have to experience violence on your own. There are people here ready to either get you out of unsafe situations or provide you supports based on your identified needs, because survivor-centered approaches are critical. People know their situations best, but that there are people available to support you if you feel you need that, particularly those that might not feel they have that community connection or folks that they can turn to maybe in their personal life or what have you, that there are people here that are trained, that are knowledgeable, that are here to support them, and do that outreach. It's so important, and it can really be the difference in some situations. So really encouraging folks to reach out for support, because there are people here that want to help.
Yeah, I mean, that's great for people just to know that, hey, if they are dealing with something, there's a lot of different avenues, like Embrave, where you can reach out and say, hey, I need some assistance with this.
Yeah, and we have a crisis line. We have a 24-hour crisis line that people can access. So literally 24/7 there's somebody there to talk, as well as if action is needed, someone there to help facilitate that action, for example, getting you out of a situation. There are people who are trained and knowledgeable in this area that want to provide that support, that are ready to do it.
Okay, that's really excellent to hear, and it's good to know that there are places where you can go that you can deal with that. And so for those of us who might not be experiencing it, like say our listeners and our viewers, but we want to support, what can we do?
Yes. Okay. Everybody has a role to play in ending gender-based violence. I can't emphasize that enough, that everybody listening, everybody watching, we all have a role to play. And we can't meaningfully and systemically end gender-based violence unless we all recognize that role, and we're all moving towards action. Gender-based violence is a systemic issue. What does that mean? So those individual instances of violence that occurs, those are the result of systems. Those are the result of an environment that allows gender-based violence to occur, that not only normalizes it, condones it, might even encourage that kind of violence to take place. So those individual instances are the direct result of systems that creates environments, and those environments are allowing, again, or encouraging that gender-based violence to take place. Dealing with systems, dismantling systems, and rebuilding them is complicated and it's complex, and it can't be done by any one person. It needs to be done on a system level. And if everyone is not involved in that work, if everyone doesn't recognize their role and take action in that role, unfortunately, at a large level that we're talking about, we're never going to be able to end gender-based violence. So certainly everybody listening, everybody watching, we need you in this work. It's critical that everybody really recognizes their role in order for us to be meaningfully able to end gender-based violence. I'll speak quickly to a survey that the Canadian Women's Foundation did in 2022. They found that of those that responded to the survey, 46% of respondents felt that the issue of gender-based violence was too big for them to play a role in ending it. That's almost half of the people that responded to this survey. That's very significant. They found that 24% felt that gender-based violence is a personal issue and not a societal problem. So a quarter of individuals. And then 23% felt that intimate partner violence was none of their business if it didn't directly involve them. So we see that these stats are really showing us that, one, it is a very big issue and it is complex, and that can make it seem overwhelming or daunting or discouraging. But really it's the reminder that this is a societal problem. Let me confirm that to whoever needs to hear that. But that if we're seeing this as a personal issue, not a societal issue, we're never going to meaningfully deal with it. If we're dealing with it constantly on an individual one-to-one basis, we're never going to get that system level change that, again, we need to change the environment, to change the norms and beliefs and systems and attitudes that are allowing gender-based violence to happen. We're not going to change the policies that are allowing this to happen, or the practices, or what have you, if we see it as a personal issue. If only those directly involved or impacted by it see it as their role, we're never going to get there because it's so complex. And so it's just the call and the reminder that this is our work, this is your work, this is all of our work, and that there are very real, tangible things you can do to be an ally and to support survivors of gender-based violence. On the PCAWA website, we have a variety of different resources, including our allyship infographic, which includes very real, tangible ways people can be getting involved in this work, whether it be educating yourself, listening to podcasts, reading books, listening to survivors, whether it be donating, both your time, in-kind donations, monetary donations. It's speaking out when you hear something not okay, when you see someone in distress or someone visibly uncomfortable in a situation. How are we stepping up to potentially prevent something from happening? Creating norms in your households, with your families, with your friends, disrupting dangerous discourses around gender-based violence, that things aren't a joke. That's something I often encounter, like, oh, it's just a joke, don't take, like, it's not that serious. Right. But it is. It's reflective, again, of narratives and systems and beliefs that are on a spectrum. So at one end, you have maybe these jokes that some may seem as seemingly innocent or not dangerous, but on the other end of that spectrum, you're getting very serious results of gender-based violence, and it only takes a few more steps to get to a very, very dangerous place. We need to disrupt it all. There are so many things people can be doing at all different levels to get involved in this work. I don't certainly expect everybody to dedicate their entire lives or their jobs to, like, there are people like me that are passionate in a way that can do that, but it's important that everybody at some level recognize that there is a role for them to play in this work. And not only is there one, we need them to come in this work and do it with us, because we can't do that system level change without them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think you highlight a very big issue, that it's not just an individual thing. It's not just something that happens privately. It's something that we all need to deal with. Yes. So for those who are listening right now, let's say they're really enjoying the podcast, they turn it off, they like the discussion. What can they do within the next day that you think can be a positive difference, or at least start that positive difference?
Well, if they have access, go look up that infographic right now. Go on the website. It's PCAWA.net. Our incredible previous our placement student, Bose Day, really worked really hard to create this incredible document. We did research about different podcasts you can listen to, different books you can read by different incredible scholars and feminist advocates that are talking about this issue, the impacts of gender-based violence. So one, that education piece. If you're able, there are ways to support organizations and grassroots organizations doing this work. If it's not monetary, it can be your time. And in-kind donations are really important as well. Reaching out to organizations to say, hey, I'd love to be able to support what you need. Like, is there a particular product that you need right now that I can be able to supply? Are you taking volunteers right now? How can I amplify your message? Can I share something on social media? Can I share something with my family and friends? Maybe if you're not at a place right now where you're able to contribute, what are the other ways that then I can amplify that message to maybe others that are in a situation where they can? Those are tangible things that we can be doing that are going to support the organizations that are doing this work day in and day out but need community support. And I also want to encourage folks when they are encountering, again, these jokes around gender-based violence and around patriarchal beliefs and norms and stereotypical ideas of what a man is and what a woman is, and even that gender binary of it all, call it out. And it's uncomfortable sometimes, depending on the space that you're in and the people that you're with. Might be the first time they're hearing that or hearing that from you. But again, it matters. And if one other person resonates with that or takes up that message and that can continue, it's huge. So really recognizing the discomfort that it comes with, but working through that, because ultimately the end goal is preventing gender-based violence, and someone experiencing a much more severe instance of violence, it's our discomfort in that time. What we're going to get from that is huge, and it's going to be a bigger impact than what we're experiencing in that moment. And just think about what the impact of experiencing violence compared to that discomfort you're going to feel in that moment of disrupting an already harmful narrative. So really encouraging folks to to sit in that discomfort and try it. Just do it once. And see the impact that might come and how you might be received differently than you thought. Maybe you might get like, oh, shoot, you're right. Like, my bad. I didn't realize the impact of that. Or, oh, I didn't see it that way. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And you might not get that positive a response. Right. You might not. But now you're aware of the prevalence of what we're talking about and how deeply rooted it is, even in your circles. And that slowly maybe you're chipping away at something that over time might not be there anymore because you took the time to kind of speak to that. So it is overwhelming and daunting at times, but what's at stake is so big that we still need to be doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of framing it, that, yeah, it's uncomfortable. I mean, nobody likes to call people out, especially if you're not someone that's used to doing that. Yeah. But you're right that, that discomfort is a lot less significant than the actual impact of what's happening. Yeah. So I think that's great. And I think, like, I'll just, say, listeners, viewers, if you want to do this, check out the website and also try and take action just once and see how that goes. Because as Rebecca says, you might be surprised by it. So
and sometimes you might get that great response, right? Or you might find an ally that you didn't know was there. Or someone, again, we don't always know the ins and outs of what people are experiencing. So you might open someone's eyes to something, or you might create a safe space that maybe wasn't there before, and letting folks know that I'm aware of these issues. I know this is something we need to talk about. And you might create a connection you didn't even know somebody needed because you made folks aware that this is something you are aware of and that you're open to talking about. This isn't something you're shy about. So you might be creating some sort of safe space or connection for somebody that they didn't know was there for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that's so useful. I mean, there's a lot of information, but I think that, there's so much that we can do that I think we just don't even realize.
Yeah, and we need to be doing it. As I said, it's so complex and systemic that the more we do on an individual basis, the larger and larger that can grow. It matters. And even if it is just on an individual basis, if you've made a difference for one person, for one survivor, that's enough. That matters. And there are other people doing that great systemic work on a higher and higher level. But the more we do it then on an individual level, the easier it's going to be for us to keep doing that advocacy work, and the less people that are going to experience violence, which ultimately is the goal, because people don't deserve to experience violence and should not experience gender-based violence.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Another thing I think is really important for people to do is believe survivors. When someone shares their experience of gender-based violence with you, to believe them, not to question it or question its validity or what have you, to just believe them. Regardless of the situation, your age, whether it's at school, in your workplace, in your personal life, whatever it might be, a stranger, to believe survivors when they express they've experienced gender-based violence. I can't underscore the importance of what that might be for someone if they've never had that I believe you feeling, or they've never received that message, or ultimately it's not your fault. You hear questions when someone discloses of, oh my goodness, why were you there? You know better. Why were you with them? Why were you wearing that? Why were you drinking? These questions, right? And when we ask questions like that, it kind of puts the onus back on the person, saying there's an answer to one of these questions that could have and would have changed the situation. So there's this onus put back on the person saying something you did led to your experience.
Right, yeah.
There's no answer to any of those questions that would make it okay for you to experience violence. You deserve not to experience violence, regardless of any of those questions and the answers that you have. So one, let's not question, let's just believe. Because we, unfortunately, often are in a society where our first instinct is to question, why did that happen to you? Or make me believe this horrible thing happened to you. Convince me.
You have to prove it to me.
Yeah,
you have
prove
to now
it
investigate.
to me.
Yeah.
How horrible is that? Like, someone is expressing to you that something bad happened to them, something traumatic happened to them, something that they're not okay with happened to them. Our first reaction can't be, well, prove it. right? That person needs to hear us validating them. That person needs to hear us believing them, expressing that we believe them, saying that I'm sorry this happened to you. Simple statements like that, if someone has never heard that, can have a huge impact. If it's the first time someone is feeling validated in that way or that they're being believed, we are potentially dispelling all the fears that they had that they weren't going to be believed. The first time somebody discloses an incident of violence, the reaction that they get is a huge indicator as to what their next steps are going to look like. If they're going to feel safe reaching out for supports and services, if they're going to trust reaching out. If we're disclosing and we're met with that hostility or those questions, that question around whether this person believes me, whether this person thinks something I did led to me experiencing this horrible thing, we're confirming all of those fears that person likely had before they made that disclosure. And so we're wanting to have that positive response and hopefully confirming to that person that there are people that are going to believe you. There are people here to offer you supports. That, again, there's nothing you can do that makes it okay for you to experience gender-based violence. And so if and when someone is disclosing their incident of violence to you, and disclosing just means telling you about it, essentially. Maybe not in a professional sense. It could be your friend. It could be a family member, what have you. Believe them. Reassure them and let them know that maybe it's not you, but there are other people out there that know how to support you, that are trained to support you, that can offer you that support, that you don't have to do it alone, and that ultimately you're here for them throughout that process, because at the root of it, you believe what they're telling you and what they said did happen, and it's not our role, anyone's role, to question it. We're just there to believe them. So that's a big way that we can be supporting survivors, is going forward with that sense of, I believe you because this is what you're telling me, as opposed to, can you prove that happened to me? That can't be our role. As allies, as folks supporting survivors, we just want to go forward with, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I believe you. How can I help? Who can we access to get you that help that you need? I think it's really an important message that if we're taking on more in the day-to-day sense, all of us, again, that's a way that we can be making that great systemic change if we're sharing that narrative with more and more people, that we need to move forward with believing as opposed to questioning.
Yeah, I think that's such a part of our culture that we always want people to prove, okay, you really did this, or like a victim comes out, it's like, well, did it really happen? Are they lying? Maybe they're lying about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's essential that, as you say, when somebody says, hey, I've experienced gender-based violence, you have to say, you know what, I believe you, and just believe them.
Yeah, especially right in that first moment. It's huge. It's such a critical, pivotal time in that person's journey. Sometimes it's just these simple statements that have the biggest impact for folks. Again, thinking through the leading up to that disclosure, the fear that builds, like the hesitation, plus the trauma of experiencing violence, in addition to now the fear of making that disclosure. Who's going to believe me? Is there someone in my life? Am I going to be blamed for this? You're already asking yourself maybe those questions. I've been in that situation of, well, why was I there? Again, regardless of that, you shouldn't experience violence. I've played that role myself personally. And so I know how difficult it can be to ultimately get to that place of telling someone. And when you're met with somebody just saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, the comfort and ease that brought me was such a pivotal time in my life. So really can't emphasize enough how important it is in meeting people with that message. It's huge.
Yeah, no, I think so, for sure. And I think, just when people tell you, believe them.
Yeah. It's simple.
It's simple as that.
Oh my gosh. Like, it is so simple. And again, it's simple, and then the impact of it, huge. I can't emphasize enough how big it is. So, yeah. Okay, I'm glad we added that. I think it's important.
I think that's good, for sure.
I think it's an important call. that's very easy for folks, very tangible. And it doesn't always have to be in a professional sense. Like, it can just be friend to friend, within families. It's often our first reaction of, oh my gosh, why this, why that? Like, even I see within my circle. So just a reminder that just believe people. Like,
Yep,
so
exactly.
simple.
Simple as that.
Literally, I believe you. Great. Like,
And now on that same level, and maybe a little bit more positive, from your experience, do you have a particular like success story that you're
Yeah.
especially like, you know what, that's why I do the work that I do?
yes, there are many, but I thought of one that I wanted to mention. So something like Take Back the Night, which I mentioned so briefly, but it really is this global movement of anti-violence, particularly around sexual violence. And it's a march, it's a rally, it's advocacy pertaining to gender-based violence, but again, particularly sexual violence. And PCAWA has the honor of hosting the event in Peel region. And again, this is a global movement. This is an event that's happening across the world, across the country, across the province. And we have Take Back the Night annually in Peel. I've gotten to be a very active part in its planning the last 2 years. As I've been as the coordinator for 2 years, and really the first time since the height of the pandemic that we've met in person for the event. So these past 2 years, and that in itself, I think, is a success story as a community. Coming together like that as a community, in a shared goal, in a shared purpose, it's success. Like, it is community at its finest, and it's coming together in solidarity, marching together, chanting together, shouting together. It's powerful to be in that space. You can almost feel the power. It's like you can touch it. It resonates so deeply, and to see so many different people from different organizations, different community groups, different community spaces, different parts of the region, come together for one common purpose, it's so powerful. And to me, these 2 evenings I've been a part of, those are success stories. Like, those are the action. Those are the things you can see and you can feel and you can hear. It's advocates coming together. It's speakers coming together. It's performers. It's spoken word artists. It's survivors. It's singers. It's, again, community organizations sharing about the important work that they do. It's the creation of beautiful signs with inspiring messages. It's sharing space together. There's so many beautiful things that come through an event like that, based on the fact that it's community coming together. And to me, those are big success stories. And the purpose is clear, the message is clear, what we're there for. But to me, that's success as a community, as a committee, as myself. I see it as a success, that it's possible to come together in such a way. Another action item: come out to Take Back the Night.
Right.
We need people here. We need people marching. When we are currently planning the December 6th vigil, come out to the vigil. It's virtual, so certainly come out, because you can do it from your home, from your safe space. Find these community events, attend them. Show your solidarity, particularly cisgendered men. We need them involved in this work, and there are spaces for you. During Take Back the Night, for example, we have the march, and we invite women, trans, non-binary, gender diverse folks to join us in the march, but we have an allyship facilitator there for the cisgendered men to stay back and facilitate conversation around allyship and how to get involved. At our last event, we had Jeff Pereira. He's such an incredible advocate and ally for the role that men play in this work, and he facilitated such a great conversation, but with a small group. We need more people involved. And it's a visual cue about who's in this work. We need more people. So attend, come out, engage in those conversations so that you can feel that power that I'm talking about. You can literally I know it not literally, but it's in a sense you can feel it. It's
Right,
something
yeah,
in the air. And that to me is the true success of one of the main things that PCAWA does, which is take back the night. On a systemic level, that's a success to me, I think.
Yeah, I think that's such a great, like the description of feeling like being able to physically touch the energy and being around all those people fighting for the same cause. I think that's such a great success story. The fact that there are so many people that are involved, and you have people from different walks of life. You have the cisgendered men who, you know, often we don't think like, well, yeah, they also have a really huge part to play. But then you have everybody else that's, you know, that's impacted by this.
Yeah.
So I think that's so great. Such a great description. So where can people get more information about the vigil and how to participate?
Yeah, all on the PCAWA website and particularly on our social media. We try to be very active on socials, sharing all the information about whether it be Take Back the Night, whether it be our vigil, whether it be the allyship campaign, and other things as well. We have a femicide infographic that we come out with. We are continuously doing advocacy around femicide in Peel region, as it is a huge issue. We have had 7 femicides already connected to our region this year, compared to the 4 we had last year. And so femicide is on the rise in our province. As of September, we've had 46 femicides in the last 44 weeks in Ontario. So just more than one a week. And so we do a lot of advocacy around femicide and conversations around the importance of calling it femicide, understanding that. So there's content on that on our socials. So really, we do our best to make sure we're staying active as world events happen around gender-based violence, as community events happen. So really, I would encourage folks to go there, as well as our website, because that's where I'm going to upload all of these infographics and our safety planning guide, our resource guide, our enhanced gender-based violence protocol. There's so much good stuff that's community-based, that's made here in Peel about Peel. So definitely I would check that out as a good place to start. And if, again, we're looking for more frontline supports around gender-based violence, that's when I would look to Embrave. We have our crisis line on there. We have an outline of all the different supports and services that we're going to provide you, what you can expect from us, how we work to create a safe space for survivors. So if you are in need, if you are a survivor experiencing gender-based violence, please go check out our website. Please call us. We want everybody to know there's someone listening. You don't have to experience violence by yourself, and we can support you, because it's when folks aren't reaching out that unfortunately we see the other end of that spectrum. So we need people reaching out. So there's so much good resources out there. Like, we just have to do a little bit of looking, but everything is there for you.
Okay,
yeah.
Excellent. And we will link everything in the description so that you can check it out. So one final question. This is one of my favorite questions. People love this question, I think. At least that's always the feedback we get. But if you could go back in time and talk to your 16-year-old self, what advice would you give them?
That was a very interesting question. And I thought about it in very different lenses, because I thought maybe professionally, how would I kind of guide my 16-year-old self? Or personally, how I would have guided my 16-year-old self. So there was a few different ways I kind of sat and thought about it. Yeah. But I think in specific reference to the conversation we're having, I thought about it as the feminist in me and the advocate in me, and what I would tell my 16-year-old self, who hadn't fully fleshed out what that meant yet and was still very much on this finding out journey of what I want to do in life. And now I've dedicated my professional life and a lot of my personal life to this work. And at that stage, I was just starting to figure out that that's something that I thought I wanted to do. So what I would say to her, I would encourage her to keep going, because she's on the right path, because the path led me here. It led me to this conversation. It led me to this work. It led me to these events, to this advocacy. So I would say she's going to go great places. She's going to meet great people. She's going to do great things. So to keep going, because she has the potential to make a true and genuine impact on this world, and to stay grounded in that, because there are going to be very difficult times in her journey, but it's that knowledge that's going to ground her through those difficult times. It's going to ground her in the times of setback and frustration and the inevitable failures that come with life. But it's that, to take comfort in knowing that through those times, the ultimate place she's going to get to is somewhere pretty special, and the work she's going to do and the impact she's going to have is exactly what she's meant to do. And also, I would tell her to be kind to herself, more kind than I think I was. That the journey isn't going to be smooth or linear, despite how my anxious self wanted it to be. It wasn't going to be. That caring about things to the extent that I do and that she does is hard, and it's messy. It's exhausting. But that there are going to be hard days, and then there are going to be harder days. And there are going to be days when I question it all, and if there was maybe an easier thing for me to do or an easier route for me to take. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to doubt your role, the impact that you can have on the world, the impact that you can have in such a complex issue. You're going to contemplate giving up. You're going to contemplate maybe picking something else. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be held accountable for those mistakes, and that's okay. But that throughout it all, to ultimately remain kind to yourself, to practice that self-compassion, to take breaks when you need them, because at the end of it all, you're going to end up exactly where you're supposed to be, doing the work you're meant to do. And you're going to find the thing you're passionate about. And what a beautiful thing that is, to find the thing that drives you, that gets you going through those hard times, that your work is meaningful. And that is such a special feeling to have. So in all of that, to stay grounded, because it's not easy work, but it's important and meaningful. And she might be overwhelmed if I said that all to my 16-year-old self.
Right.
But in theory, maybe I speak it a little bit more accessibly for my 16-year-old self. But I think the gist of what I'm saying is just that it's not easy work, but ultimately you're on the path that you're meant to be on, and the impact you can have and you're capable of is there. And in a world that doesn't often want these messages to be shared, you're going to be a voice that's willing to take it on. But ultimately to be kind to yourself and to others, but as you're engaging in this work yourself, because it's going to be hard sometimes, but it's important.
I like that a lot. Like, I think, like, basically just the idea of telling yourself, or someone who's, maybe you're 16 years old and you're still trying to find yourself, there's something great about someone coming along, and in this case, it's your future self saying, you know what, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I felt like I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
To be like, you're on the right path. You're going to succeed. You're going to struggle. There's going to be some challenges.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're going to succeed, and to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of things that, like, we're not always kind to ourselves.
No.
Now we weren't always kind to ourselves in, at 16-year-old or at 16-year-old. So I think it's so important for us to hear that.
Yeah. It's daunting to make big life decisions.
Right. It is. And everybody at 16 or around you is saying, hey, you're 16, you're almost ready for university.
Yeah.
You got to start thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah.
What do you want to do when you grow up? And it's so hard to know. So just getting that encouragement that you are on the right path is,
and I think too,
so helpful.
Even if you aren't then, knowing that you'll find it. And rest assured in that, or take comfort in that, like, I got you. This later version of you has you and is going to figure it out for you. And even if I'm lucky that I feel like I found my passion, and I have people around me that are still trying to figure that out, but knowing that that's okay. Because ultimately we will get to a place where people around you will help you on that journey, and you'll get there. because being 16 is hard just in general.
Oh, it's very difficult. Like, I'm so much like more relaxed now, but being at 16, there's so many expectations.
Oh my gosh.
So many stressful things.
So like, oh my gosh, don't put too much pressure. Also, I feel like mine gave a lot of pressure, but just, you're going to figure it out one way or the other.
Exactly.
I think that's the key message. If you had to bottle it down, you'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Just remember that. You're going to be fine.
Please.
You'll figure it out. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Rebecca, thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome.
I think it was a great discussion, very informative. And just a lot of good actionable things that I think we as people that want to support individuals who are going through this can actually do.
Yeah.
And that's so helpful.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yes, anytime.